If anyone in this room thinks she came here to be used, they can answer to me. Everett Calloway's voice cut through the hall like a slammed door, and every pack member in the Sun Hall went still. Mara Bennett had only been standing there for 10 seconds, but it already felt like she had walked into a place where no one wanted her, and everyone expected her to know it. The council dais was raised above her by 3 stone steps. The guards stood in a line with their hands folded behind their backs. The nobles in their polished coats looked at her like she was a problem that had been delivered on purpose. Mara kept her chin level anyway. She had crossed too many lines, signed too many forms, and watched too many hungry mouths at home to flinch now. "I volunteered," she said quietly. "That should still count for something." A few people laughed under their breath. Not because it was funny, because Omega girls like her were never supposed to speak like that. Everett didn't laugh. He stood at the far end of the chamber in a black coat trimmed with silver, his expression controlled to the point of cruelty, the kind of control that usually meant a man was holding a storm behind his teeth. He looked at her once, and Mara felt it immediately. A sharp, impossible tug in her chest. Not pain. Not exactly. More like something deep inside her had heard his name before her mind did. She went very still. So did he. For one brief second, Everett's eyes locked on hers, and the whole room seemed to notice the change in the air. A few wolves shifted their weight. One guard glanced between them. The council elder beside the throne narrowed his eyes like he had just spotted a crack in the palace wall. Everett's jaw tightened. "That," he said, lowering his voice, "was not supposed to happen." Mara swallowed. What wasn't? He did not answer. Instead, he turned toward the council and said, in a colder voice than before, "The arrangement stands. Mara Bennett will remain at the palace until the matter is resolved." The elder stepped forward at once. "Your Majesty, an unranked Omega from a failing pack is not fit for close proximity to the throne." Mara felt the words land like a public slap, but she did not look away. "I'm standing right here," she said. "You can insult me faster than that." A few people blinked. One of the younger attendants almost smiled and caught herself. Everett's mouth barely moved, but Mara saw it. Not a smile. Something close to one. Then it was gone. He stepped down from the dais, slow and deliberate, and stopped just far enough away to keep the line between them respectable. Close enough, though, that Mara could feel the weight of him. "You're here because your pack asked for protection," he said. "And because someone in this room thinks your arrival will solve a problem they created." Mara held his gaze. "Then maybe I should know what problem that is." Everett's answer came after a beat too long. "You will," he said, "when I decide you're safe enough to hear it." And just like that, the room changed again. Not because she had won anything. Because Mara Bennett had just realized she was no longer standing in a negotiation. She was standing inside a secret. The silence after Everett's last word was worse than the insult. It hung over the Sun Hall like a storm that had not decided whether to break. Mara could feel every pair of eyes still on her, still measuring her, still trying to decide what category of problem she belonged in. Not guest, not ally, not exactly prisoner, either. Something more useful than that, which somehow felt even worse. The council elder finally broke first. "Your Majesty, with respect, the palace is not a shelter house for every struggling Omega who walks through the gate." Mara turned toward him before Everett could answer. "That is funny," she said. "I was just thinking the same thing about men who speak as if kindness is a security threat." A low murmur moved through the room. It was not laughter, not really, but it was close enough to make one of the younger attendants hide her face behind her sleeve. The elder's expression sharpened. Everett did not look away from Mara. That was the problem. He should have looked away. Kings were supposed to know how to make people feel small without ever seeming interested. Instead, he watched her like he was trying to remember where he had heard her voice before. "Show her to the West Wing," he said at last. "She will have a private room and access to the lower garden path." The elder stiffened. "That is too close to the royal corridor." "Then walk faster," Everett said. It was such a dry line, spoken with such calm authority, that a few guards shifted before they could help it. Mara almost smiled and did not let herself. A palace servant appeared at once, carrying a plain gray cloak and a brass key. Nothing decorative, nothing welcoming. It was the kind of offering people gave when they wanted to say you are here by permission, not by invitation. Mara took both without comment. "Follow me, Miss Bennett," the servant said. "It is just Bennett," she replied. My pack does not have much use for titles, and I am trying to keep the family tradition alive. This time the smile happened. Small, brief, gone before anyone could accuse her of it. The servant led her through a corridor lined with tall windows and old portraits of previous kings. Every face looked like it had once made somebody else nervous. Mara could feel the palace before she could understand it. The gold trim, the polished floors, the careful distance between doors, the quiet rules inside the quiet rules. This was a place built to remind people where they stood. At the center of it all was Everett Calloway, standing under pressure so constant it had probably become part of his bones. She knew better than to trust a man just because he looked burdened, but she knew something else too. The tension in the hall had not only been political, it had been personal. The moment he looked at her, something inside him had shifted. She had felt it. Her wolf had felt it too, restless and alert, pacing just under her skin like it had recognized a scent the mind had not caught up to yet. By the time she reached the West Wing, the servant was speaking again, explaining meal hours, guard rotations, and which doors were not to be opened without permission. Mara heard none of it fully. She was too busy looking at the view from her window. The lower garden path ran along the wall, narrow and private, with bare winter hedges and a small iron bench beside a frozen fountain. It was not much, but it was enough to watch the palace without being watched back. Enough to think. Enough to hear the kind of secrets walls never managed to keep for long. Then, from somewhere beneath the floor, a low sound vibrated through the stone. Not a voice. Not quite. Something deeper. Mara went still. The servant either did not notice or pretended not to. Your supper will arrive at 7, he said, setting the key on the table. If you require anything, ring the bell. He left before she could ask a question. Mara stood alone in the room, listening to the quiet, and then she heard it again. A rough, unsettled sound, like a wolf shifting in pain or frustration below the palace floor. Not loud enough for anyone else to notice. Loud enough for her to know something was wrong. And loud enough for her to realize the secret Everett had been protecting was not just political. It was alive, and it was very close. The sound came again just after midnight, low and uneven, like someone trying not to be heard while failing at it. Mara stood in the center of her room with her hands still on the edge of the table, listening to the stone under her feet as if the palace itself had decided to breathe. She should have stayed put. She knew that. Every sensible part of her knew that. But the ache in the sound, the way it kept dragging through the floorboards, made her open the door anyway. The corridor outside was dim, lit by wall lamps that threw long gold lines across the marble. Mara moved barefoot and quiet, following the vibration more than the noise itself, past 2 closed doors, down a narrower hall, and finally to a plain iron door at the end of the wing. No crest, no decoration, just a lock and a chain that had been added later, like someone had decided the door itself needed to be ashamed. Mara reached for the handle, then stopped when a voice came from behind her. Do not open that. She turned. Everett was standing in the hall with his sleeves rolled up and his black coat gone, looking less like a king and more like a man who had not slept properly in days. The tiredness in his face made him look older and somehow more honest. You should really stop appearing behind me like that, Mara said. It is a bad habit. It is a palace. That is not an answer. His eyes flicked toward the iron door. Neither is this. Mara folded her arms. Then say the real thing. He hesitated, and in that small hesitation she saw it. Not weakness. Not exactly. Something far more difficult. A man who had spent too long holding a private disaster behind a locked door. My wolf is not well, Everett said at last. The words came out clipped, controlled, almost unwilling. And before you ask, no, it is not safe for you to be near him. Mara looked past him at the door. He is the one making all that noise? Everett gave a single, tense nod. He has been refusing food, refusing treatment, refusing everyone except me, and even that is becoming unreliable. Because he trusts you? Because he is angry with me. Mara blinked once. That sounded almost normal. His mouth moved, just barely. You are enjoying this too much. A little. She looked at the door again, then back at him. Why hide him down here? Everett's jaw tightened. Because the council believes a king whose wolf is unstable is a king who can be replaced. There it was. The hidden truth, finally sharp enough to cut. Mara felt something cold settle in her chest. Not fear. Recognition. She had lived inside packs long enough to know what happened when weakness became a rumor. People who smiled at you one day would start calculating your value the next. So they are not just watching you, she said quietly. They are waiting for you to fail. Everett said nothing, and that silence was answer enough. Mara stepped closer, lowering her voice. Then stop treating this like a shameful secret. His eyes shifted to hers. You think I have a choice? I think you have been acting like a man who forgot he is allowed to have one. For a second, he looked as if he might argue. Then another sound came from behind the door, deeper this time, rough with frustration. Everett's hand went to the lock. Mara caught the movement with her eyes and heard herself say, before she could stop it, "Let me help." He looked at her like that was the most dangerous thing anyone had offered him all night. You do not know what you are asking. I know enough. Their gazes held. And there it was again, that strange pull under her ribs, a quiet, impossible recognition neither of them had named yet. Everett's voice dropped. If you go in there, you listen to me first. Mara nodded once. Fine. He unlocked the door. The chain gave a hard metallic rattle. And when the door opened, Mara caught her first glimpse of the thing Everett had been protecting from the entire palace, and she understood immediately why he had been so afraid to let anyone else see it. The moment the door opened, Mara understood why Everett had treated the whole thing like a state secret. The wolf inside the room was huge, silver gray, and coiled tight with the kind of exhaustion that made him look dangerous even while he was barely moving. One foreleg was tucked too close to his body. His ears pinned back when the light hit him, and a low sound rolled out of his chest that was not quite a growl and not quite a warning. It sounded more like frustration than rage. Mara stopped just inside the doorway and kept her hands visible. All right, she said softly. No sudden moves. Everett stood beside her, tense as a drawn wire. That advice is mostly for you, he muttered. Mara glanced at him. That was rude. That was accurate. The wolf's amber eyes flicked between them, then fixed on Mara with open distrust. He looked less like a beast and more like a man who had run out of patience with being managed. Mara took one slow breath and crouched a few feet away, not close enough to crowd him. You are clearly not in the mood to make friends, she said. The wolf huffed once, almost offended. Everett gave the smallest shake of his head, like he could not believe she was talking to him that way. He hates everyone tonight, he said. Then we already have something in common, Mara replied. That earned her the briefest pause from the wolf. Not trust. Not yet. But attention. She watched his body language the way her mother had taught her to watch frightened pack dogs back home. The tightness in the shoulders, the uneven breathing, the way the tail did not settle. Nothing about him said he was untamable. Everything about him said he was hurting and furious that anyone could tell. Mara looked at Everett without standing up. How long has he been like this? Everett's jaw worked once before he answered. 3 weeks. And you kept him locked under the palace instead of asking for help. I asked for help. The edge in his voice sharpened. The council sent healers who wanted to sedate him and measure him like livestock. Mara's expression cooled. That sounds familiar. Everett looked at her then, really looked, as if he had only now realized why she had not flinched from the room, from the wolf, or from him. The wolf let out another rough breath and shifted his weight, then stopped immediately, as if even that much movement cost him. Mara caught the strain in the motion. He is compensating, she said quietly. He is trying not to show pain. Everett stared. You can tell that from across the room? I can tell a lot from across the room. She stood, slow and careful, and reached into the satchel she had carried from home. Not tools for a battle. Not anything dramatic. Just clean cloth, a small vial of oil, and a folded strip of linen. Simple things. Human things. She turned back to the wolf. I am going to come closer, she said. If you do not like it, bare your teeth. If you want me to leave, I will. The wolf watched her for a long second, then gave a single impatient flick of his tail. It was not permission exactly, but it was not refusal either. Mara stepped closer and crouched again, this time near his shoulder. The wolf tensed, then held still. When she reached out, he did not snap. He did not pull away. He just watched her hands like he was bracing for bad news. Her fingers found heat in the muscle, then the slight tremor that told her the pain was deeper than the body wanted to admit. Not broken, not poisoned. Something wrong in the strain, the bond, the way he had been holding himself together too long. Mara exhaled through her nose. Yeah, she said. You are not fine. The wolf made a low sound that might have meant, obviously. Everett folded his arms, still watching both of them. Can you help him? Mara looked up at him. The question mattered too much for him to hide it. Maybe, she said. But only if you stop pretending this is something you can out stubborn. For the first time since she had met him, Everett looked almost cornered. And the wolf, as if he understood exactly why, settled one heavy paw on the floor and stared at Mara like she had just become the most important person in the room. By the time Mara finished her first pass, the room had gone so quiet that even the lamps seemed to be holding their breath. The wolf was still watching her, but the hard edge in his stare had changed. Not soft exactly, just less guarded. Like he had decided she was either useful or impossible, and had not yet chosen which one offended him more. Mara cleaned her hands on the linen strip and glanced up at Everett. He has been carrying this wrong for weeks, she said. That is why he keeps getting worse when he shifts. Everett's face tightened. You are certain? No, Mara said, honest as ever. I am experienced. The wolf made a sound in the back of his throat, low and irritated, as if he did not enjoy being discussed like a difficult case. Mara actually almost smiled at that. He does not like being told the truth, she said. Neither do most kings, Everett replied. Mara looked at him for a second, then back at the wolf. That explains the company. Everett let out one short breath through his nose. It was close enough to a laugh that Mara noticed. The wolf noticed too. His ears flicked forward, then back, like he had caught something in the air he did not trust yet. Mara stood and moved toward the small table near the wall. I need warm water, not hot, she said. And a clean basin. Everett did not move at first. You are giving orders now? Yes, Mara said. That is generally how helping works. He held her gaze for a beat, then turned and opened the door. A servant was waiting outside, clearly startled to see the king emerge from a hidden room under his own palace looking like he had not slept in days. Water. Basin. Fresh cloth, Everett said. Now. The servant disappeared. Mara looked down at the wolf again. He listens to you fast, she murmured. Only when it matters, Everett said from behind her. She glanced over her shoulder and caught him watching her with an expression she did not have a clean name for yet. It was not suspicion anymore. Not only that, he looked relieved in a way that clearly annoyed him. The water arrived moments later. Mara worked carefully, washing the strained area and checking the heat under the skin. She had no magic trick, no royal title, no family name that made anyone behave. What she had was patience, and she had learned long ago that some pain only answered to patience. The wolf relaxed by degrees. Not all at once, just enough to prove he was listening. Mara spoke to him in a low voice while she worked. You can be angry if you want. That part is not the problem. The wolf's eyes narrowed slightly, as if he suspected she was making fun of him. But if you keep bracing against everything, you are going to make it harder to heal. He gave a small huff, then shifted his head closer to her hands by the width of a breath. Everett saw it. Mara saw him see it. For a second the whole room seemed to tilt toward that tiny motion. It was nothing and everything at once. The wolf had chosen her without meaning to. Mara felt that choice settle in her bones in a way that was strangely familiar, almost like recognition. Her chest pulled tight again, that same impossible tug from the hall, stronger now. She looked up at Everett. Do you feel that? She asked quietly. He did not answer right away. His eyes were on her, then on the wolf, then back to her again, as if something inside him had just gone very still. Yes, he said at last. The word was low. Controlled. Too controlled. Mara straightened slowly. What is it? Everett's jaw shifted once. It should not be happening this quickly. The wolf gave a deep, impatient rumble, as if offended by the entire conversation. Mara looked between them and understood, all at once, that the hidden thing under the palace was not only a sick wolf. It was a bond waking up, and if she was right, the palace was going to feel it long before anyone was ready to admit it. The warning came before the palace ever did. Mara felt it first in the wolf's body, a sudden shift in the room so subtle that most people would have missed it. His breathing changed. His ears lifted. Then Everett went very still beside the door. What is it? Mara asked, though the answer was already in the air. Everett did not look at her right away. He was staring at the wolf with the kind of focused men reserved for things they could not afford to misread. Someone is coming, he said. A second later, heavy footsteps crossed the corridor outside the hidden room. Not a servant, Not a guard on routine duty. Too steady for that. Too confident. Everett reached for the door at once, but Mara stopped him with a hand to his wrist. Wait. He looked at her sharply. Why? Because whoever that is already knows this room exists. The footsteps stopped on the other side of the iron door. Then came a voice, smooth and dry as old paper. Your Majesty, I was told you were unwell. Everett's jaw tightened so hard Mara could see it. Lord Whitmore, he said, and the way he said the name made it clear he had no patience left for the man attached to it. Mara stood very still. The name meant counsel. Influence. A man who belonged too close to the throne for comfort. The voice outside continued, calm as ever. I hope I am not interrupting. The wolf gave a low sound, deep in his chest, and Mara felt the bond tug again, sharper this time. Not pain. Warning. Everett felt it too. His shoulders squared, and for one brief second Mara saw the king he had been trying not to be in front of her. You are interrupting, Everett said through the door. Leave. There was a pause. The council requested an update on your condition. Mara caught the tiny emphasis on condition and immediately disliked the man she had never seen. Tell the council I am fine, Everett said, and tell them to stop sending people to sniff around my private quarters. A faint smile seemed to enter the other man's voice. Your private quarters are not the concern, Your Majesty. The concern is that your wolf has been heard more than once beneath the east wing. Mara looked at Everett. He did not move, but she saw the flash of anger in his eyes. So that was it. The secret had already started leaking. Not enough to prove anything, but enough for whispers. Enough for the pack to notice the shape of the truth before anyone admitted it. The wolf stood then, slowly, with visible effort. Mara instinctively shifted closer to him, ready to steady if needed. His paw landed with a dull thud on the stone floor. The sound carried through the door like a challenge. On the other side, Lord Whitmore went quiet. Everett noticed, and so did Mara. You hear that? She murmured. He gave a small nod. He should not be able to do that yet. And yet, Mara said, he did. The wolf lifted his head and stared at the door like he understood every word. Mara had seen animals protect people before, but this was different. This was choice. This was loyalty sharpened into something almost formal. Everett turned toward her, and the air between them felt tighter than it had a minute ago. You need to leave, he said, but there was no force in it. Mara heard the real meaning underneath. He was trying to protect her from the politics already gathering at the edges of the room. No, she said quietly. I do not. He stared at her. Mara, you did not hide this for 3 weeks just to let me walk out now. For a second, he looked almost helpless. Not weak. Never weak. Just cornered by a truth he had spent too long refusing to name. Outside, Lord Whitmore's voice came again, softer now. Your Majesty, the council will expect a formal answer by morning. Everett did not respond. He was looking at Mara, and Mara was looking at him, and the wolf between them was looking at both of them like he had already chosen a side. Then Everett said, very low, if they find out what is happening here, they will come for both of us. Mara did not look away. Then we make sure they do not get the chance. By sunrise, the palace no longer felt quiet. It felt alert, like a house that knew a storm was coming and had started listening for the roof to give way. Mara had barely slept. She sat near the window in the west wing with a cup of tea that had gone cold an hour ago, watching the lower garden path and trying to make sense of the pieces that would not stay still in her mind. Everett had left before dawn to meet with the council, and the wolf had stayed behind, restless and stubborn, pacing the hidden room beneath the palace like he was angry at the entire world for existing in layers. When Mara stepped back down to check on him, he lifted his head the second she entered. He was better than he had been the night before, but only just. Do not look so pleased with yourself, Mara told him softly. You are still in trouble. The wolf snorted, which, coming from him, felt almost disrespectful. Mara crouched and checked the dressing she had set in place over the strained muscle. And before you start acting brave again, I am not impressed. He gave her a long, sideways look that made her think he understood every word and resented all of them. He listens to you, Everett said from the doorway. Mara looked up. He was back already, coat open, hair a little less controlled than usual, and his expression had that same clipped tension from before. You are late, she said. The council was not generous with time. Were they ever? No, he admitted. That, more than anything, told her how bad the morning had been. He crossed the room and stopped beside the wolf. They know something is wrong, he said quietly. Mara stood. How much do they know? Everett gave a short, humorless breath. Enough to start asking the wrong questions. And who is leading them? He hesitated. That was answer enough. Lord Whitmore, he said. He says he is concerned for the stability of the crown. Mara folded her arms. He sounds like the kind of man who smiles while he sharpens the knife. Everett's eyes flicked to hers. You are not wrong. The wolf gave a low sound, almost a warning. Mara turned toward him. What is it? Everett followed her gaze, then went still. The wolf had shifted his weight toward a narrow stone seam in the wall. Once. Twice. Not random. Intentional. Mara moved closer and saw it. A loose panel hidden low behind a row of old storage crates. Her pulse changed at once. You knew about this? She asked the wolf. He only stared at the panel, then at Everett. Everett reached for the edge and pulled. Behind it was a narrow compartment no bigger than a bread box, with folded papers inside, tied with pale blue ribbon. Mara looked at him. What is that? Everett did not answer immediately. He took the bundle out, untied it, and spread the pages on the nearest table. Old ledger copies, private notes, a list of palace visitors, payments marked by hand, names, dates, and one repeated route through the west corridor, all of it hidden under the signature of a council clerk. Mara leaned in. Someone has been tracking who comes and goes down here. Everett's jaw tightened. Yes. For how long? Long enough to build a story around it. She read the pages once and then again, slower. One name came up more than the others. Lord Whitmore. Not as an author, exactly. As a beneficiary. Mara felt the room settle around her in a way she did not like. This was not only about your wolf, she said. No, Everett replied. It never was. The truth, finally, had a shape, and it was worse than she expected. The council had not been waiting for Everett to fail by accident. They had been watching for an opportunity to call it failure on purpose. By the time the council chamber filled, Mara could feel the tension before she saw a single face. The room had that polished, formal stillness people used when they were about to pretend a hard truth was only a misunderstanding. Everett stood at the head of the long table, one hand resting near the papers Mara had found, his expression calm in the way that meant he had already spent the morning refusing to break. Mara stood beside him instead of behind him. That alone changed the room. Lord Whitmore noticed first. He looked from Mara to Everett with a thin, courteous smile that did not reach his eyes. I was told this meeting concerned palace security, he said. It does, Everett replied. And loyalty. That word landed hard enough to quiet the last of the whispers. Mara kept her face steady even as she felt every gaze in the chamber shift toward her. Council members, guards, attendants, all of them waiting to see whether she would shrink. She did not. Everett placed the papers on the table and slid them forward. These records were hidden beneath the West Wing, he said. They track private movement through the palace, payments to clerks, and repeated access to areas that were never supposed to be logged. Lord Whitmore did not blink. Old housekeeping records are hardly treason. Mara heard the calm in his voice and disliked it immediately. Everett did not raise his own. No, he said, but using them to watch me is. That brought the first real reaction from the room. A few heads lifted. A few backs stiffened. Mara could feel the moment tipping. Whitmore folded his hands. Your Majesty is being dramatic. Mara almost laughed. Almost. That is rich, she said, looking straight at him. Coming from the man who turned a secret into a strategy. Whitmore's eyes narrowed. And you are? The person who was not supposed to find out. The words came out sharper than she intended, and good. She wanted them sharp. You told the pack I was a temporary arrangement, she went on. You told the servants to keep me away from the lower corridor. You told the council the wolf was unstable. All while you were collecting proof, waiting for the right moment to use it. Everett turned his head toward her slightly, just enough to listen. Not to stop her. That mattered. Mara kept going. You were not protecting the crown. You were building a story around it. Whitmore finally lost a little of his smoothness. You have no standing in this room. She has mine, Everett said. The words were quiet, but they hit like a strike. The chamber went still again. Whitmore looked at him as if he had misheard. Everett did not move. This council has spent too long treating fear as procedure, he said. You wanted my wolf to become evidence of weakness. You wanted Mara Bennett dismissed before she could speak. You wanted the pack divided, the throne smaller, and the truth delayed until it no longer mattered. Mara looked at him then. There it was again, the part of him he had been hiding behind duty and silence. Not soft, not weak, just finally honest. Whitmore opened his mouth, but Everett did not let him take the room back. Enough, he said. You will answer to the full council for every record, every payment, and every lie attached to this scheme. The silence after that felt different. Not empty. Decided. Mara could see it in the faces around the table, the moment when a room full of people realized the old story was over. Whitmore looked at her one last time, and whatever he saw there seemed to annoy him most of all. Not a girl to be managed. Not an Omega to be silenced. Just a woman who had decided not to disappear. Everett did not touch her, but Mara felt the bond between them pulse anyway, steady and alive. When the council chamber finally began to stir again, she understood the truth of the day. The betrayal had been real. So had the cost. But for the first time, the palace was not hiding the damage. It was naming it. The council chamber did not erupt. That would have been easier. Instead, it went quiet in that terrible, careful way people get when they realize the ground under them has moved, and they are the last ones to feel it. Mara stood at the edge of the table with her hands relaxed at her sides, watching Lord Whitmore lose the polished look he had worn like armor. No shouting. No grand speech. Just the slow collapse of a story he had expected everyone else to believe. Everett did not let the silence drift. The records will be reviewed, he said. The payments will be traced. The clerk who helped hide them will be brought in. And the pack will know exactly who used fear to climb closer to my throne. A few heads turned at the word throne. That was what mattered. Not the title. The responsibility behind it. Mara saw it on the faces around the room. Some were angry. Some looked ashamed. A few looked relieved, like they had been waiting for someone else to say what they already knew. Whitmore set his jaw. And the Omega? He asked, his tone sharp now, stripped of its charm. What happens to her when this is done? Mara did not look away from him. She had spent too much of her life being spoken about like a temporary inconvenience. Not today. Everett answered before the room could. She is not a question mark in my house. The words landed hard. Not because they were loud, but because they were final. Mara felt something shift in her chest at the way he said it. Not possessive. Not performative. Certain. Whitmore tried one last time, almost softly. Your Majesty, you are choosing trust over order. Everett looked at him with a calm that felt older than anger. No, he said. I am choosing the kind of order that can survive truth. Nobody moved for a moment. Then one of the council elders lowered his eyes. Then another. The chain broke quietly, one person at a time, the way real change usually did. Mara looked at the papers on the table, at the names and dates, at the proof of how long people had been watching and waiting for a chance to make her small. And for the first time, she did not feel swallowed by it. She felt seen. Later, after the chamber emptied and the guards stepped back into the corridor, Mara found Everett at the edge of the lower garden path. The winter hedges were bare. The frozen fountain still had not thawed. The air was cold enough to sting the lungs. He stood with both hands braced on the stone rail, looking out over the grounds like a man thinking about what kind of kingdom he wanted to leave behind. The wolf was beside him, steady now, no longer hidden, no longer something to bury under the palace. You know they will watch me harder now, Mara said. Everett turned. I know. That was not really an answer. It was the honest one. She gave him a small look. You are getting better at that. I am trying. The wolf nudged Everett's arm once, then looked at Mara as if to confirm she had noticed. She had. Everett let out a quiet breath, almost a laugh. My council thinks this is a victory for discipline, he said. My pack thinks it is a warning. And what do you think? He looked at her for a long moment. Then, at last, his voice softened. I think I spent too long believing a king had to stand alone to be worth following. Mara did not answer right away. The words deserved that much. At last she said, and now? Everett met her eyes. Now I think the people worth keeping are the ones who tell the truth before the throne breaks them. The wind moved through the garden, thin and cold and clean. Mara felt the mate bond between them settle into something quieter, steadier, no longer a shock, but a promise. Not a rescue, not a bargain, a choice. She lifted her chin. Then do not build your kingdom on silence again. His expression changed, only slightly, but enough. I will not. The wolf settled at his side, and for the first time, The three of them looked like they belonged in the same frame. Not perfect, not tidy, just real. Mara glanced toward the palace windows, where people would already be starting news stories about what had happened inside. Let them. She knew what mattered now. Loyalty was not blind obedience. Power was not worth much if it crushed the people it was supposed to protect. Love, when it was real, did not ask an Omega to disappear to make a king comfortable. It asked him to grow up. And Everett Calloway, at last, looked ready to do exactly that.